Hi, my name is Brianna and I'm an actor. Over the past year in this COVID reality, I sort of had to redefine and rediscover what actor meant for me. And one of those ways was starting to do more voice work and audiobook narrations. This is Ben. He's the owner and head engineer of Centennial Sound Studio here in Grand Rapids. He designed this studio with physics in mind, and he let me pick his brain about some physics concepts and how they relate to sound and narration. We had over an hour-long conversation where I learned so much about sound and narration and really how I take for granted how intertwined physics is throughout the whole process. Unfortunately, I can't include all of that here, but here are the highlights. When Ben created this space and started blocking and managing sound, some of the things that he took into account were mass, decoupling, reflection and diffusion, and absorption. Mass can work to physically stop sound. In order to only use mass, large amounts of soundproofing that are several feet deep would be required, which was not something that was necessarily an option here. Not only that, but you can't soundproof with just mass if that mass is attached to the thing making noise. Here, that noise is often the sound of cars revving on the street next to the studio. Those low-frequency sounds are not absorbed well and have low reflectivity, making it easier for them to pass through barriers. That's where decoupling comes in. The walls have several layers of drywall that are not actually touching. Between these layers is something called green glue, which works to stop sound from passing through. But the foundation is still attached to the ground, and so those low frequencies still sneak in. I've been in this space dozens of times, and I never noticed some of the ways that reflection and diffusion are accounted for. These are diffusion panels. They work to stagger the surfaces that the waves are bouncing off of, and therefore stagger the frequency to avoid standing waves. They also mask the height of the room and contribute to the tone, but we'll get into tone later. Parallel surfaces are also avoided, and most walls are at least slightly angled differently to ensure that no flat surfaces are there for sound to overlap on each other. The walls that are parallel have absorption panels. Like we talked about with mass, 3 inches isn't necessarily going to do much, but they are able to keep the high frequencies from bouncing back and forth. All of these things and more contribute to the tone of what is produced in the space. In class, we talked about the tone and quality of a voice and how it can help identify unique speakers, but I hadn't thought about how the makeup of a space actually creates its own unique tone for everything that is produced there. Reverberation is the process of repeated reflections of sound in an enclosure, and our text indicates that the amount of time it takes for the reverberant sound to fade out depends on the size and materials that make up the room. At the same time, these things contribute to the tone of the room itself. For example, Ben found that drywall doesn't have a very good reflective quality to it, but certain types of wood and certain textures do. He wasn't trying to stop reflection and reverb altogether, but instead, by combining certain materials and textures, he was able to create a unique reverb quality. But there are areas that he does try to totally stop reverb and absorb as much sound as possible. This is a dead room, and it's where I spend most of my time. The purpose of this room is to take out all variables so that you don't hear the tone quality of the room at all. There are several reasons for this, like maintaining consistency and allowing for more freedom in the editing process. For example, if I'm reading in a dead room, Ben can apply digital reverbs or make it sound like I'm somewhere else, like the Grand Canyon. But if we record outside of the dead room,
if they start here, they're always going to be here. It'll be them in this room in the Grand Canyon.
I output a lot of energy when I'm reading in this small room, and as we've learned, only a small percentage is actually converted into sound energy. The room can heat up when I've been going for a long time because some of that energy is converted into heat. I actually took a swing at creating my own dead room a few months ago, just to speed record some auditions. It's definitely not as fancy or aesthetically pleasing as Ben's studio, but it gets the job done. When I first sent Ben my samples that I recorded in here, he said that I killed the reverb as well as some of the home narrators with professional setups. I didn't know how to break the news to him that I had recorded everything while kneeling in my pitch-black closet with blankets nailed to the walls, but looking at it now, all these clothes definitely contribute to stopping reflections, absorbing that sound and that energy, and killing reverb. So, here's a DIY if anyone wants to try it out. At the end, I asked Ben if he thought he could do his job without physics.
Yes. Is that the wrong answer?
It's not the wrong answer, but as we kept talking, we realized that it's sort of an incomplete answer. Ben's understanding of basic physics gives him a base to build off of. Of course, physics equations alone are not going to create the same art that Ben makes, but this base is what allows him to try different things and do the fun stuff and be creative. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Physics and art can and do work together.
I want you to go present all this stuff and then realize in class that I've been lying to you for an hour.